First of all, let me thank you for the discussion posts that you have shared on Telegram. Well, they represented your careful analysis of how you have been using media and how you have been sending and receiving media messages. I was truly amazed to see that you guys were able to criticize your usage of media and how many hours you're spending. And I'm sure that this little analysis can give you in-depth understanding of how media can be very much attractive to you so that um, it, it can take up all your time. And sometimes you find yourself searching for the information, browsing the net, and therefore spending lots of opportunities with media instead of spending it for real opportunities. So it's very important to be able to self-control. It's important to know where the limits end. So you did a really good job. Thank you for those who have commented to each other's posts. That made the discussion even more interesting. I really expect everyone to participate actively in this discussion posts because you know that they are milestones for grading purposes. So we are starting today the first topic of December. So it's almost winter. Yes, so we have almost finished with November topics, with the lead discussion being the summary assignment of November topics. And today we are studying media and bias topic. Bias is perhaps one of the topics that you guys have been interested in, as we have conducted a little survey previously. The results revealed that most of the participants joined the workshop in order to find out information about bias, on the ways of how to identify bias, and etc. So today is the introduction part of media and bias sessions. In the upcoming sessions, we will discuss types of bias. We will discuss the ways to cope with bias and with bias analysis. Today, we will have a general introduction into what bias is and how we can control bias or reduce the levels of bias in the media we are producing, and how to identify if the media you're receiving is biased. So let's get started. Well, to start with, I'm sure that you guys already have some ideas about what bias is. Before we define it here, I would like to hear some of your ideas or your background knowledge. What do you know about bias in terms of media literacy in media? So have you ever come across bias? What do you understand by bias? Please feel free to share your thoughts.
Hi.
Yes, sure. Hello.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
In bias, we can see media that is being covered from one side only, not the full fact, but we will see what the producer wants to show us.
Okay.
And mostly it would be based on their ideas, not about the facts, maybe not about the rules, decrees of the government, but their idea, maybe to promote some kind of things according to their own preference.
Okay, great. So limited coverage, right? That's what you are saying. Thank you. That makes perfect sense. Thank you. Others? Do you guys have any ideas to share? Well, you may type your ideas in the chat if it's more comfortable for you, or you can take the floor. Yes, sure. Please go ahead.
Good evening, first of all. So bias, I think we have talked about it in previous lessons, I think. And bias, if we, for example, one message, and this message, if we talk about only advantages or only disadvantages, if we speak about only advantages or only disadvantages, it will be bias, I think.
Okay, great.
Right.
So, yes, sure. That's also one piece of a puzzle. Bias is a big thing, and you have defined one part of it very well. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. And anyone else? Shall we go on? Okay, so great. You have provided quality insight into what bias is. So when you come with your background knowledge on bias, today's session and some of the activities in it will be very easy for you. So let's start. First, where are the roots of bias? How does bias happen and why media has bias in it? So in order to answer to those first questions, we will go back to the roots of bias. Well, please take a look at these pictures. Can you see cylinders from left or to the right? So what is the direction that they are turning into? Are they from the left or from the right? You can type your answers on the chat.
Hi everyone.
Hi.
Well, the picture is so strange, and I think it's from the left. I think.
You think it's from the left side. Okay, thank you. Okay, more participants are supporting you, saying it's on the left. Good. We will just leave it open and we'll turn to the next one. Okay, so what can you see in this picture? Can you see a rabbit or duck?
It's duck.
Duck. Okay, are you sure it's duck? Nazima is saying it's rabbit. She's typing it's rabbit. It's a rabbit.
Yes, it's rabbit.
But then it looks like duck, right? You can see the beak here. You can see
also
here. Both. We are getting the answer of both as well. Okay, we'll leave the question open, unanswered, and then the next one. What can you see? Old lady or young girl?
Young girl.
Young girl. Everyone is seeing young girl? Nobody is seeing old lady? If you pay attention on one hand, here you can see the eyes, mouth, nose, and wrinkled face of an old lady too. Or everyone is seeing a young girl. A bit challenging, right?
yeah, sure. Somehow it's look like old lady and young girl. But for me, it's young girl, I think.
Okay, all right, thank you.
And also I can see old lady.
You have started seeing old lady.
Both of them. Yes, yes.
Great. Next picture. Can you see a human mouth or flower?
Flower.
Flower.
And
Okay.
butterfly.
All right. So it looks like flower to everyone. Take a look at the next picture. What do you think? Is it creepy or common? So does this picture represent something creepy, something scary, or just something common happening? What can you see in this picture, basically?
Well, for me, it's common, I think, because
Okay. Can you describe what you see?
There is so many people. We can see there somehow it's like crowd
Okay.
of people. Then I choose common.
But I can see an ugly man.
Yeah.
Okay. Sure, it's a company of young women, very clad, stylish, and at the same time, it's ugly men, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What about this? The rock lodge, or can you see the horse head? Does it
rock
look
ledge?
okay? Just rock, right? No horse head. It's not a horse.
Yeah.
Okay, what about here? Is it the archway or the old man? Is it the arc that takes you out to the field, maybe? Or is it an old man?
Old man.
Okay. Everyone's an old man?
Yes, old man.
Okay, great. Thank you. Can you see, what can you see? Can you see branches, winter branches, or can you see a face?
Winter branches, I think.
They look like branches. Okay, great. Thank you. So here we will start our today's session with this quote by John Stuart Mill. He says that the human faculties of perception, judgment, discriminative feeling, mental activity, even moral preference are exercised only in making a choice. He who does anything because it's the custom makes no choice. So here you have important information about human perception, judgment, and discrimination. Here it means that distinguishing something from another thing. So basically what we have just tested is your perception. How do you perceive represented images? Actually, they were made in the style to make you challenge, and they represented both. It was difficult to analyze which side to look at, right? Both sides, both old man and the archway, for example, they were pretty much representing themselves, and you feel challenged to choose which side to look at, which side was the right side. So bias is pretty much the same. Those images that we have just looked through exemplify the fact that sometimes the same perceptual input can lead to very different representations, which means that every person, every user of media have their already shaped inbuilt perception or eye of perception, and they see the media or they receive the media through those eyes, through those lenses. Well, we have to keep this in mind if we would like to have our objective achieved in terms of analyzing bias in media. Now, those of you who try to see both sides, you have done a good job because that's how it works with bias. You have to see both sides. You have to judge both sides, and then you can make conclusions. Bias happens just like this. You think that you are reading an article on one thing, but as you keep reading, you realize that it's actually about something else. Or it can be about a picture, it can be about any type of media. So perception can be very delusive. Perception only is not enough in order to judge if media contains bias or not. So we have to be very careful. We have to try to look at the both sides and only then make conclusions. Now, as we talk about bias today, bias, it's a noun and it's often followed by prepositions towards, against. So we can have bias towards something or bias against something. For example, bias towards political situation in Iran, bias against women, and etc. So dictionary definition is bias is a predisposition or prejudice. The word prejudice is always used as a synonym to bias. It's a systematic distortion. As you know, the distortion is, well, changing the originality of something. So bias is when the original message in media is changed for different purposes. Media bias is the term used to describe a real or perceived bias of journalists and, of course, producers in news and video production and within the mass media in the selection of which events they will report and how they will cover. So there are many areas bias can appear in media? Well, to analyze them all, we have to be first aware of what are the types of media bias. There can be ethnic or racial bias that is related to promoting or ignoring some ethnic groups or racial representatives. There can be corporate bias. So some media try to promote only some layers of business and etc. There can be bias towards class. In some media, just take Instagram as an example. You can always see a very stylish, rich, and clad people, an elite layer of society who can afford very luxurious lifestyle. So it's not really promoted through Instagram, different images of the world or other classes, or even if it's promoted, it's a little bit restricted. Just like this, media bias can be towards class as well. Political bias is one of the biggest, let's say, areas that bias can appear in media. We will talk about it in detail. There can be religious bias. That's what is happening around the World Cup in Qatar right now. Lots of bias in the coverage of the same events. If you listen to the coverage represented by Western media and by radical media, by local media, and you compare them, you can see a lot of qualitative examples of bias. There can be sensationalism bias. So some events can be emphasized, some events can be, let's say, given little importance. And of course, we can have bias towards sex, age, education, and many others. So let's start with types of bias in depth. First, news is perhaps the biggest source of bias. We talked about fake information and trustworthy information. Bias is more than that. While fake information is produced solely for the purpose of, let's say, meeting the needs of one group of producers of media or in order to get attention, bias has even stronger aims for news. At one time or other, we can complain about bias in the news. The fact is, despite the objectivity is being the cornerstone of journalistic work, every news story is influenced by attitudes and background of the people involved in its creation. Just one example, take two news companies. The same event described by Fox News and BBC, and then local news agency. When you compare and contrast them, you can clearly see that every program serves the needs and the, let's say, demands of their news producers. So they do contain bias. And also, you can find examples of bias by watching the journalistic techniques that allow to creep into the news. As an example, so take a look at this. Here you have headline, Officer Killed Escorting Clinton, Bush Motorcade Kills Cop. So here is a little bit bias in this headline. Before I talk about it, can you take a look at those headlines only, and tell me where you can see the example of bias in here? No ideas are coming? Take a closer look. Okay, so as you can see, the first headline is about an officer. So the main focus hero of this headline is officer. It said, officer killed escorting Clinton. Perhaps Clinton has nothing to do with this event. but adding his name would make it seem like there is some, say, connection of this event to Clinton. Or Bush motorcade kills cop is killed, and well, probably President Bush didn't have any hand in this. He did not have any participation, but the headline makes it seem like they are the actual participants of those events. Here, you can clearly see that this headline is trying to divert from its true course of events. If the first one was represented as officer killed escorting, then it would make more sense. Or in the second one, if it's cop is killed during motorcade or motorcade kills cop, that would make more sense because this is the central idea of this news. But they are adding the name first in order to get some attention, gets more coverage, and second, by doing this, they are trying to make influential people part of the event purposefully. So this is just one example how headline can contain bias. Well, we usually tend to read headlines first before reading news. Most people scan all the headlines or on newspapers and websites, and if some headline catch their attention, then they read the article. That's basically that works this way with every one of us, right? So, well, you can find bias and prejudice in headline so that you will read those articles and you will be influenced by them. Well, actually, headline calls you to express approval or condemnation. You approve this headline, you keep reading. You disapprove or condemn this headline, you skip it. So this is the reason why sometimes headlines are enriched in bias on purpose. Next, bias can exist in photos that you see in media. Take a look at this picture. Well, doesn't look very biased, does it? Can you tell me, is this picture well represented? Is there anything missing in this picture? Or is there anything that is unusual about this picture?
Can I?
Yes, sure, please go ahead.
So in this picture, maybe it's this man is playing ball, right? Maybe it's with one of the sport types, and this man is not sportsman. He is like political man, maybe.
Okay, yes, sure, that can be. Now, as you can see, some pictures can flatter a person, give the person credit. So if they wanted to represent this guy as let's say, as a powerful person, they would perhaps use the photo of him catching the ball. But here you can see that his legs are not strong and he's taken up the position that's not athletic and he missed the ball. What does this picture say? That this person is not good at sports. And that actually gives less credit or takes away credit from this person. So pictures flatter a person or they can make people look unpleasant. Well, media sources choose pictures on purpose in order to represent something. If they want to represent something in a positive light or to flatter something or to promote something, then probably you see very inviting pictures. Well, on the other hand, if they want to make something look unpleasant, then they can choose the shades of pictures that achieve this purpose. Well, any media source can choose photos to influence opinion about candidate for election, for example. That was the case with our picture. So this is a candidate, sure, a political person involved in politics and trying to win the game. By posting this photo, you are saying that that person is not the person because the picture says it all. So on television, in a magazine, or on the web page, in social media, visual images and how they are represented or displayed are extremely important points to analyze bias. Well, also the captions of the newspapers all can be potential source of bias as well. Sometimes some pictures that seem weird for you are not weird at all. They are chosen on purpose deliberately in order to represent or misrepresent a person or an event. Before we turn to the next, let's say, next aspect of bias, can you think of any example, any picture that you came across on any type of media that made you think that something was very cool or something was unpleasant? It can be about a person, it can be about a product, it can be about event. So can you think of anything that comes to your mind?
As we saw above, CNN's newspaper article, Time,
Okay.
there once I faced such kind of bias photo. Actually, it was on television about 2 or 3 days ago. I also faced such kind of thing that was really strange for me, and I thought, what is that? It's just for attracting people or involving something from us. I thought that maybe type of advertisement or something like that, marketing maybe, I thought, and it was the picture we have seen above recently.
Okay, all right. It made you think that, well, it was there for strange reasons, yes? So actually, it's
Yeah.
not because, yeah, they chose it very carefully. It made you think of more or less about a person or about an event. So this is how pictures can, let's say, can be enriched in bias, how pictures can demonstrate bias. Thank you. Now, bias can appear in the names and titles as well. Well, sometimes media can use naming or giving titles in order to promote bias. So here you can see comics saying it is simple, Mr. Bush. Layton is a freedom fighter there, jihadi here, a gentleman in this part. And so as you can see, the names of freedom fighter, jihadi, so they are actually naming some events by putting them in quotation marks and naming the things. They are representing the bias. So, well, Layton can be a freedom fighter for some country, while he's not for the US and for the Western. Well, actually, how titles are directly put into media is always biased because there are always two sides of the coin. So one person or one event can be named only after careful analysis. But if we name something or someone or some event without careful analysis first, that will become that will result in bias. So names, titles, if they are given to you, let's say straightforwardly, then always take a careful look. Try to see if those names are trying to change your opinion about a person or about an event. Does this name or title truly match the actual event or actual person? Make some search and then you can find the big picture or you can see the real image, whether this title or name is there on purpose or does it really represent the true nature of the event or true nature of the person. Okay, next. Just to add, News media often use labels and titles to describe people, places, and events. So a person can be called ex-con or be referred to as someone who served time 20 years ago for a minor offense. Whether a person is described as a terrorist or a freedom fighter is a clear indication of editorial bias. So editors of those types of media are doing it on purpose in order to make you to take this idea and think in their shoes. So they are basically trying to control the way you think or you perceive something or someone. So whenever you are given a name, please be very careful. Of course, ask questions. Why? Why this name? So is this event or is this person really, let's say, can really be labeled like this? Or is there other side of the coin? You have to always ask yourself this question. So, statistics. Media often includes statistics, especially news media. And on those statistics, there can be bias. You can see two statements. First says, more than 900 people showed up at the event. And the second statement says, less than 1,000 people showed up at the event. So when you're reading about one event, what would be your impressions when you read statement 1 and statement 2? Can you please tell me what impression you got from both statements? What did it tell you? So let's say we are talking about World Cup opening ceremony. If the news outlet tells you more than 900 people showed up at the event, and the other source tells less than 1,000 people showed up at the event, what are your emotions? Or do you, let's say, perceive this information positively or negatively after reading one of those statements?
Can I?
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I think they are the meaning are the same,
Sure, yes.
and more than 900 people showed up at the event. It is a positive message,
Okay,
and less than 1,000 people showed up. It is negative one, I think.
okay. Thank you. Anything
Yes.
else? That's it, right?
I guess
Thank you.
maybe
Yeah, sure. Please go ahead.
more than 900 people showed up at the event. It's like the event was not so popular. No, I'm sorry. Event was very popular that it gained hundreds of people and everything like this. And when it says like less than 1,000 people showed up at the event, it's like it was not so interesting, or maybe it was not so popular, so that it did not gain that much people. Maybe this is the reason.
It's the hidden message. Sure. Thank you. Thank you so much. So the first statement, as you have stated, it gives more credit to this event, right? It makes it look more, while the second statement lessens the event. So as you can see, the same statistics, the same numbers can be used in two ways in order to show something in a positive or negative light, in order to make something look more or less than it actually is. So always be careful with the statistics. Well, especially when we read or receive information about disasters, sometimes they are made to seem more spectacular and therefore more newsworthy, and numbers can be inflated. So the same two statements can be a good example of how media can use statistics for, let's say, promoting bias and therefore selling more products or news. Well, next one is bias by source control. Here you can see a statement. There are 98 daily newspapers circulated in Canada. 92% of English Canadian dailies in circulation today are owned by 4 corporations. So you can see that 98 daily newspapers, it's a big number. And you can see that almost all of them, 92% of them, are run by 4 corporations. What does it tell you? Before I talked about bias by source control, what can you guys tell me based on the statistics? So how can this situation promote bias? Take a look at the numbers. Take a look at the statement again. So it's about the situation, it's about the newspapers in Canada. Anything coming to your mind? Nothing?
Maybe like most of the newspapers are controlled by 4 corporations, and mostly these corporations own these 4 these daily newspapers. Most of these daily newspapers, maybe this is the bias.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Anything else? That's it? Okay, great. First, thank you for noticing that it's about daily newspapers. So it's about daily intake of, let's say, news that people are receiving. And the newspapers being owned by 4 corporations shows the tendency to select information sources to support, let's say, particular set of beliefs or values. Of course, those corporations serve certain purposes, and while they own such big part of the daily news, it affects how people receive information and what information they receive. And also it implies that the way they collect the facts, the way they represent the facts can be questionable, as it's not about, let's say, different layers or different sources telling you the story, but basically the same source telling you the same story in the same light by more than one mean of media. So this is how bias is promoted through source control. We will talk about it in depth in our upcoming session as well. So in order to detect bias, always consider where the news items come from. It is the information supplied by a reporter. It can be an eyewitness information. It can come from official sources like police and others, executives. It can come from the government itself. Now, each may have a particular bias that is introduced into the story. Companies and public relations directors supply news outlets with fluff pieces through news releases, photos, videos, and other types of media. So often news outlets depend on pseudo events like demonstrations, sit-ins, and others that take place mainly to gain news coverage. So this kind of aspects should be taken into consideration when you are trying to receive unbiased information. Well, next, bias can be in word choice as well. Media can choose words carefully. The words that seem like, let's say, they do not belong in certain text or context, they are there for purpose, because word choice can also contain bias, and it can be on purpose in order to promote, lessen, or let's say give credit to certain events or classes. Take a look at 2 examples. In the first example, you can see a piece of news by Associated Press. A young man walks through chest-deep flood water after looting grocery store in New Orleans on Tuesday. After looting grocery store in New Orleans on Tuesday. And another news coverage represents the same event as two residents wade through chest-deep water after finding bread and soda from a local grocery store after hurricane. The word looting in the first one and finding bread and soda from local grocery in the second one are exactly examples of bias. Well, what happened in this event is someone has been rescued from the flood. So the person is holding something taken from a grocery store. And the first media making it look like that thing was looted or stolen, while second media outlet is giving it the image or the credit of finding bread and soda, which is the basic human necessity in such conditions. So this is how word choice can be biased, or it can contain bias on purpose. The same event can be represented in two different lights. Again, in order to serve the purpose of the producer. Well, I'm sure that you come across word choice bias a lot these days. Can anyone give me example of a recent media piece that can be video, that can be news, or any other type of media where you have come across bias by word choice? Or maybe you didn't
May-
notice it at that time? Yes, sure, please.
Maybe we did not notice it because once you know the information is misleading you, you can control yourself and the way that you think. But when you do not think about it, you may not notice that. So if you read daily news about the politics in the world, you can see the information about the war in Ukraine, and
Okay.
even the last missile that hit the Poland. Maybe if you take a look in different media have different positions about it. Some like it can be told like missile hit the Russian missile hit the Poland, not the NATO country, and the other media can say like Ukrainian defense had a mistake that they could not prevent the Russian missile. It's like two different information about the same topic.
Thank you. So you identified that it was biased by word choice by, let's say, receiving the same information by two different outlets, right? You compared the information and then you came into this conclusion that it was biased by word choice. But you are very much right. It's very hard to notice bias by word choice when you are receiving information from one source only. Great. So as we have mentioned in the beginning of our workshop, always try to alternate the sources, always try to see what other sources tell in order to see if it's a fake news or if there is a bias. Thank you very much. So that was a very good example of how political situation can be misrepresented, biased by choosing certain words and expressions. Thank you. And yeah, just like you have mentioned, connotations can be used and sometimes sarcasm can be used in order to influence the reader or the viewer. So a hockey game, for example, can be described as a loss or close game or near win. So I'm sure that nowadays the most popular topic on the news, that's football or soccer as they call in the US. Now, if you have seen the game, for example, between Saudi Arabia and Argentina, and then compare how different news sources represented the same event, you can see a clear difference. Yeah, some are describing it like pure luck, while some are giving some credit to Saudis, while some are trying to use this situation in order to criticize the coach of the team Argentina, and etc. So based on the purpose, one event or one person or situation can be described in a positive or negative light. And when we do it by word choice, usually connotations, sarcasm, and other, let's say, linguistic features can be involved in order to misrepresent the information, the original piece of information that existed. Thank you. And the last thing we talk about today is bias by placement. Well, here you can see the cover of Times magazine. There is an example of bias in this. Before I talk about it, can you guys take a look at the cover? Can you read the description of the cover? And then, can you please tell me where you can see bias in this cover? So
To be honest, I have no idea.
you have no idea. Okay, do you know who is Tiger? I mean, that person on the cover, he's a very famous sportsman. You guys, Tiger Woods, perhaps you
Golf player.
Yeah, golf
One
player,
of the
sure.
most wealthiest golf players.
Yes,
Most
a
successful,
famous
maybe.
name, yes. So now, what do you think? Why there is Tiger Woods and why there is such description and where is the bias in this? Maybe girls can pitch in and help you out. Nazima, Munawar, do you have any ideas?
I don't have any idea. Nothing is coming to my mind.
Okay, thank you. All right, so as you can see, Tiger Woods is on the cover page of Times Magazine. He's famous. People usually tend to follow famous and successful people, and he's one of the persons that is well respected and well established. So probably his picture on the cover will make people open this magazine and read, while right after the title, they are putting coverage of the Republican National Convention begins on page 26. So they are basically using Tiger and his image in order to get some coverage for Republican National Convention, a political thing going on that they should put their perspective in, that they should spread in a way that their producers demanded from them. So basically, one famous face or something very catchy can be used as a hook in order to get your attention so that you will, let's say, take up the piece of news they have prepared for you or piece of idea that they want to put into your mind. You will get to that point without realizing. You start, let's say, turning the pages of this newspaper in order to read more about Tiger Woods, and then, well, this little description or little advertisement maybe will make you read about Republican National Convention. Well, in this text, for sure, they have represented certain event in certain light, and they really want you to think like them, to follow their lead, and this is the reason how even a cover page of a magazine or newspaper can contain bias. Well, in today's session, we talked about the term bias. We talked about types of bias. We talked about where we can find bias in media. In upcoming sessions, we will talk in depth about each type of bias, and we will have practical exercises in finding bias, even when you do not have sources to compare. This is it for today. And if you have questions, you're welcome to ask, or if you have any clarifications, anything that you would like to say as an end note, Please, stage is yours. No questions? Everything clear?
Yes, we don't have, no, I don't have any questions. Everything was so clear, and thanks for your sparing your valuable time
Thank you.
for
Thank you for
us.
participating in today's session. And thank you for those technological issues that we experienced in the beginning of the session. So as usual, your home assignment is going to be writing a reflection. So in your reflection today, you will concentrate on bias. We can talk about how, well, how you see bias now, where you can find bias, or you can put some personal examples of you finding a biased information and then finding out that information was biased and how you did this. So basically, your reflection on the topic of bias. You can summarize the main point of our today's session, or you can rely on your background information, background experience, and talk about any situation where you were fed biased information. So I will be seeing you next time then. Have a nice week ahead, and thank you for your time. Thank you for joining today and making the discussion parts more interesting.
Thank you. See you soon.
Thank you. So
Thank you.
sure, we'll meet soon again. Take care.